Now, before I introduce our first keynote, I want to give you a little background on the two keynote presenters you're going to hear from today. You know, the one cool thing is they're both one of us. They live in the Twin Cities. They're technology professionals here. We didn't fly in experts from out of town because we've got a lot of great talent and insights and perspectives from executive leaders here, which we're really eager to share. The second thing is they're going to be sharing information on things that are maybe not how technology is used in each of our companies, because you'll hear that throughout our breakouts, but more of what are some of the challenges and opportunities for technology in a broader sense, whether it's quantum computing and connected to artificial intelligence and some of the risks and benefits to geopolitical implications and humankind, to later from Jay Shree talking about science skepticism and the need to get more women in the technology field. So I think we've got some great keynotes today. But let's start with our first, Matt. When we first were choosing the theme of disruption for today, thinking about disruptive technologies, disrupted workplaces, disrupted ways of doing work, we felt Matt would be a great way to open up our minds to new possibilities of implications of technology disruption. I first met Matt a year ago at this conference. He was doing a presentation on quantum computing. I learned about qubits and just the massive power of quantum computing and what can it do, and some of the unintended consequences. So happy Matt's joining us today. Matt is a budding futurist, most recently Senior Director of Artificial Intelligence and Cognitive Technologies at Optum. He's going to take us through a kind of a wild ride. His presentation, I think you're going to find to be a bit provocative, thought-provoking, enlightening, maybe a touch scary, as we kind of follow him on a journey around the positive implications of technology disruption, but also thinking about and confronting some of the unintended consequences. So with that, happy to introduce Matt Versaggi.
Technological disruption. It's the theme of this conference, and it's a journey we're going to go on. And I think an interesting journey indeed. Technological disruption. It's an existential challenge on par with nuclear war, an ecological challenge, ecological collapse. This was a statement made by Yuval Harari. He's a futurist. 3 years ago, in the World Economic Forum Davos conference in 2020. He also said technology might disrupt human society and the very meaning of human life in numerous ways, ranging from the creation of a global useless class to the rise of data colonialism and digital dictatorships. So there's three aspects of this that we should double click on. Tech disruptions, the nature, and the very theme of this conference, but what a futurist is and what futurists do and the value that they bring to the table and how they might be in places you might not imagine. And the World Economic Forum and the influence that they parlay on a global level. So let's do a developmental detour. Let's talk about what a futurist does. They're in a lot of surprising places. Effectively, what they do is they examine the past. They interrogate the future, and they inform the present. Most importantly, they invent the future. And this is important because this provides vision to the strategic planning process in a rigorous way. I won't go into the rigorous details, but that's effectively what they do. Now, what they don't do is predict the future. No one can predict the future. There's no crystal ball. This is not what they do. However, they can get a little on the dramatic side every once in a while, so I want you to keep that as a backdrop to the rest of this conversation and those that you have with other futurists. Now, Minnesota is not without their own titans in the space in this futurist. Cicely Summers is a futurist. Minnesota has a futurist group as well, and there are futurist conversations and breakouts in this very conference. You should look those up. Now, futurists or foresighters, they have a process. They look at the past and they examine the current domain. It could be anything. Cooking, education, in our case, disruptive technologies. They do a current assessment of that space within the current space, and they're looking for two things: signals and the drivers of those signals. And when they find something, signals meaning small innovations that have the potential to disrupt an entire field or fields of practice if they grow in scale and magnitude. Now, the signals, there's a whole process and rigor associated with what futurists do. It's not like they're reading crystal ball. But those signals are generally attached to drivers. These are larger structural changes in society, technology, economics, and politics that underline a long-term shift. And what they do is they find that and they trace it to its larger structural driver. And then they establish, through some rigor, this is not willy-nilly, plausible scenarios of the future, and they study them. And then they come back to the present and inform the present strategy makers of how you might either go to a future that you want or avoid a future you don't. And this 10-year span is so important because if you look at how history unfolds over time, 10 years is a time frame in which anything can happen. There's complete fluidity in that 10-year span. And you will find that that gets leveraged quite a bit. So I have to move your perspective from now to the next 2 years to 10 years in this process. So that's part of our developmental detour. The next is the World Economic Forum. Now, whether you like them or you don't, whether you think they're the devil incarnate or whether you think they're God incarnate, they're an influential group. If you don't know who they are, you should. This should be on your radar to understand. So the World Economic Forum is where we'll be pulling quite a bit of information from this perspective today. But what they really are, they're a lobbying organization for multinational companies. Started by Klaus Schwab, that's Klaus down there. He wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. We'll be taking quite a bit of information from that. He also wrote a second book called The Great Reset that keys off the COVID event of late. Great Reset, just to give you kind of, as we start getting on these themes, is a state-managed environmentalist, first of all, state-managed, environmentalist, and corporate-aligned reconstruction of the world economy. So keep that in mind. So there's some general themes in the WF. Global influence and reconstruction of the world economy. So that's our developmental detour. Getting back to this, technological disruption is an existential challenge on par with nuclear war and ecological collapse. In that presentation, we've already ferreted out 4 areas that we're going to dig into and look for the insights there. Social and economic disruptions. AI causes inequalities not just between classes, but countries. The rise of digital dictatorships and disruptions to our biology. That'll be our first foray. We'll get into a second foray after that. That's a quick menu. Let's look at social upheavals on the social and economic level. So the threat of automation and limiting jobs has been argued for a long time. It's been present for decades now, and it's not just AI. And people would say, well, you can just learn a new job. You can learn a new skill. The individual can adapt. They can learn new skills. That's not the real concern now. Speed is being factored into this. It's the rate of change. How fast can they learn a new skill set that they can economically rely on? As you will see, because of the rate of change, that's being called into question. Now, innovation, well, actually, disruption from automation is never a one-and-done thing. You don't have disruption and you get sort of an equilibrium until the next disruption comes in a period of time. It doesn't work like that when you have what we call accelerated acceleration. Automation is not a one-and-done thing. You have these waves of disruptions, what we call occupational disruptions, never ever increasing wave after wave after wave, so that it becomes the new standard. These disruptions just happen all of the time. And look in the history, you'll note that may be true. Now, we believe that because although you may have heard a lot about AI and its grandiose maturity now. It's really not. I mean, it's kind of a babe in the woods. AI is nowhere near its full potential, and as we get further in, you'll see that. The rate of change is something that you're going to need to keep as a backdrop in all of the discussions here. Because what that does, if things happen too fast, the struggle in the 21st century is against irrelevance, not exploitation. It used to be exploitation. Now it's irrelevance. And what's happening is there's a useless class being created because of the time frame here and the speed of change and the speed of these disruptions. It's not useless to your friends and family, but it's useless to the economic and political systems out there. Now, the AI revolution is argued that it will cause inequalities not just between the classes we talked about, between countries as well. So one of the things we've learned about humans in large quantities is that first industrial countries tend to exploit the other ones on a global scale. Britain did it, Japan did it, US did it. It's what we do. It's baked into our DNA. This could easily happen with artificial intelligence. There's a book written about that called Augmented Exploitation. And that is one of those situations where AI could create immense wealth in a few tech hubs like the United States, like China, like the EU. But other countries would go bankrupt. And this is a real scenario at a global level, right? And we are already in an arms race, an AI arms race. Actually, it's an advanced technology arms race because quantum computing and other advanced technologies are being factored into this. But AI has unique characteristics. But we're in an arms race. Let's be clear about this. I mean, it's not even under the covers yet or any longer. There are books written about it, When AI Rules the World, and they do pit US and China as two of the global protagonists in that space. Now, when we talk about AI doing all of this, we're not talking about Terminator-type conscious and sentient robots, right? The AI that we're speaking of is really quite primitive. I mean, I think the little tiker there with his headphones on, playing on his iPad is actually kind of a stretch, and I've been in this business since the 80s. But it's enough to tip the global balance. So, what will happen to developing economies once it's cheaper to produce textiles and cars in California than it is in Mexico? And what will happen to the politics of your country in 20 years? Remember, there's 10-year periods put together. When somebody in San Francisco or Beijing knows the entire medical and personal history of every politician, of every judge, and every journalist in your country, including all of their sexual escapades, their mental weaknesses, and their corrupt dealings. Will that still be an independent country? Or will it be a data colony? And you'll see, as we go on, that if you have enough data and computing power and biology, you don't need to send troops in to control a country. Now let's talk about the rise of digital dictators. So there's a 20th century defining formula, at least as it's argued, right? B times C times D equals A, right? Biology, if you know biology, enough biology, you have enough computing power, and you have enough data. Sound familiar? You have the ability to hack humans. Now, the individual hacker can do that, and we have that now to a large extent. I would throw in psychology and psychops into that, and I will. When you know more about me than I know myself, and you can, if you factor in all of those things. You know my personality type, my political views, my sexual preferences, mental and emotional weaknesses, deepest hopes and fears. You can make decisions for me. You can control me. Now, if you can do that with everyone, using AI as the middleman, then you can give rise to the digital dictators. And that's what we're talking about here. And by the way, that's just not rogue states. That's also corporations. So let's look at this. A few attributes: scale, will, and the means. So if you have AI, and you can predict someone's feelings and desires, kind of like Twitter, maybe Facebook, and you can manipulate those, kind of like Twitter, maybe Facebook, then you can begin at scale to make decisions for people. Just push them around. They'll bend to your will. Now, rogue states, dictators, and despots have wanted to do this for decades. The will has always been there, but they didn't have the means. They didn't understand the biology. They didn't have the data, and they didn't have the compute power. But even if you look at World War II, what Hitler had, he had a number of folks who were trying to create the Uber soldier. They didn't have the means, but they had the will. Soon, some corporations and some governments will have this power. And AI will be sitting in the middle of that with the ability to hack all of their people. Now, we humans need to get used to this idea that we are no longer mysterious souls. We're hackable animals. And that's a change. Now, these powers can be used for good or nefarious activities. And if they were ever to get in the hands of a 21st century Stalin, the result would be the worst totalitarian regime in history. And we already have a number of applicants for that job. Now, if we manage to stave off the digital despots, the ability to hack humans might very well undermine the meaning of human freedom. Humans are beginning to rely more and more on AI to make decisions for them. And when you do that, authority tends to shift from the human to the algorithms. And this is important to note. Facebook tells us what's new. Google tells us what's true. Netflix tells us what to watch. Amazon tells us what to buy. And Twitter tells us what to think. It's not inconceivable that in the future an AI could tell you what job you can have, where you would work, who you would marry, or if you would get a loan or not. And then the grand drama of human life. We tend to view life as a drama of human decision-making. History is littered with just tales like that. When artificial intelligence and other advanced technologies begin to take over that role, what does that do to the meaning of life? This is an existential question that should be asked. Now, it's been argued that whoever leads artificial intelligence in the year 2030, what time is it now? 2023? It's 7 years. Will rule the world until 2100. So it begs the question, just how powerful is AI really anticipated to be? Well, if you look at it as a GPT, and I mean general purpose technology, it does take shape that way. General purpose technologies really have shifted power balances, economic balances, and social constructs all the way around. Domesticated animals, electricity, the light bulb, steam engines, steel, rubber, have all been technological advancements, and they've changed things. Now, they are called GPTs because they tend to have wide applicability over many domains. And they also spur lots and lots and waves of innovation in new products and services. So AI has to be viewed as a GPT because it's going to infuse everything and everyone in some sense. And when it does that, it really does stand to reason that whoever controls that on a global scale could rule the world. And it's been argued when we looked at quantum computing that whoever wins that race, the table stakes of that are geopolitical dominance for decades to come. This concept of geopolitical dominance based on technology is something you'll see over and over again. And it's not new. It may be new to you, but as most things happen, they'll happen under the covers, and then they'll come into the mainstream over time when they've come to their fruition. Now, let's talk about disruptions to biology. There's a few other themes that I want to bring out here. Number one, man's attempt to be godlike. This is what we do. Since the beginning of time, we've wanted to develop powers that have us behave like gods. Power of creation, power of innovation, and lots of things. There are three In this route, there are three aspects, three trajectories that seem to be front runners for this. Biological engineering, cyborg engineering, and artificial life. And it's worthwhile to double click on all of those. So re-engineering life, the reconstruction of biological chemical processes to augment human life has been out there for a while. Books have been written about it in the 80s. You can get supplements to improve your cognitive capability when you're taking tests in academia. There's no shortage. That is the front runner of technological engineering that you will see. Cyborg engineering is kind of interesting too, especially when you're helping people who have prosthetics and things like that. But it's come a long way from what you see on the screen there to implants in the brain to implants in the body. And of course, there's artificial life, the creation of inorganic life forms that we create. Now, AI and biotech will give us godlike abilities. It's argued that it'll give us godlike abilities to re-engineer life and even create completely new inorganic life forms. Remember, we like to be like God. So after X number of billion years, organic life is now being shaped by organic life being shaped by natural selection. We intend to enter a new era of inorganic life being shaped by intelligent design. This is the key point, our intelligent design. And the idea is for this to be the new driving force for the evolution of life. Now, you can't see it because it's really small. But this was February of 2023, not very long ago. Another World Economic Forum discussion in the UAE, I think. Klaus Schwab came out and said, those who master artificial intelligence and synthetic biology will be masters of the world. In his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, he talks about this being characterized as a fusion of technologies that blur the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres. Now let's be clear. What he's talking about is transhumanism. And if you've not heard that term before, it's very interesting. And it's not new either. It just may be new to you. Transhumanism is a philosophical and scientific movement that advocates the use of current and emerging technologies, such as genetic engineering, cryogenics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and others, to augment the human condition and improve the human condition. Now, you'd be surprised when you look on the global sphere how much support is for this, and some of the more domestic support for this in areas you wouldn't expect, like Google's co-founder, Larry Page, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and Tesla's Elon Musk, and the United States government at the highest office. So let's go look at this. This is an executive order. Now, you can see this, September 12th, 2022. Now, there's a lot of words on this screen because these words matter in an executive order. This is an executive order to establish a bioeconomy. And I just want to read a few things and talk about it in the larger context. We need to develop genetic engineering techniques to be able to write circuitry for cells and predictively program biology in the same way we write software and computer programs. Unlock the power of biological data through computing tools, artificial intelligence, blah, blah, blah. So this is establishing a bioeconomy, not an industrial economy, not a services technology company, not a digital economy, a bioeconomy. We are entering into a new phase, a brand new economic space, and we are leading this area in the United States. So this is important to note. Now, I'm going to read my notes here because I think this one's important. The intent is to establish dominion over the fundamental biological programming language of the human body and bend it to the will of man. Now, let's just take a step back, because this is real, and this is establishing a bioeconomy, and this is happening. Given the fusion On a global scale, the calls for the fusion on a global scale, biology, digital technology, and advanced synthetic intelligence. And the theme of world dominion, and on top of that, godlike power's trajectory. I want to ask a question that I'm fairly certain hasn't escaped your gaze during this conversation. And that is, what could possibly go wrong? It reminds me of the quote below, which I think is pertinent. When you see something technically sweet, you go ahead and do it. You only argue about what to do about it after you've achieved success. Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb. Now that was here. Now we have biolabs everywhere. Wuhan, Ukraine, Sudan, all of which are in the news. So this is not a passing fancy. So, given our new divine powers of creation, we're likely to make mistakes on a cosmic scale. Imagine that. Human character has not kept up with technological advances of any sort over the history of humanity. And that's what worries me the most about having humans with sharp objects of instruments of power to play with. As the history of human restraint under these circumstances is positively abysmal. So let's move away from a global order of things and take select trends for the year 2023. We're moving in a different direction. And I'm going to add my commentary in this, but Jim Carroll and Dr. Mark are two people we'll be pulling from. Just 4 selections. We'll dig into some spaces underneath that. Technoskepticism, meaning, you know what? Technology may not be such a great thing after all, depending on how it's used. The massive velocity of AI. AI all of a sudden came up this year, out of nowhere. Why is that? What does it mean? Knowledge velocity and skills velocity is another one. And then escalating risks in reality. And this will give you a flavor of these technology trends vis-a-vis what will affect you moving forward. Let's look at technoskepticism. We'll go left to right. Disgust and worry about big tech. There's a book written about it called Don't Be Evil. Okay. The bad behavior of big tech is the only story recently that's larger than artificial intelligence. And that's saying something. Big tech has helped to drive hate and fear, racism, and more. And there's a serious backlash, a very real backlash underway on many levels. This is an indictment of how today's largest tech companies are hijacking our data, our livelihoods, our social fabric, and our minds. This is a very significant trend, and I would challenge you, I would highly advise you to follow it. The next one on there is wage equilibrium, vis-a-vis remote work. Now this is interesting because we've all heard about layoffs. All these technology layoffs, technology bust, blah, blah, blah. But if you look under the noise to the geographics of this space, what you're going to notice is that though highly paid, because remote work is here, thank you, COVID, and it's here to stay, and it's been finally accepted that it's here to stay, you will see those high-paying jobs in those major metropolitan areas being jettisoned because you can get the same talent, likely in the Midwest, for a lot cheaper, and they'll work a lot harder, and you'll pay them a lot more than they've ever been paid. So you're going to see this wage equilibrium happening. That is really the trend under the trend for many of these tech layoffs that you hear happening out there. Now, it's great for the companies on those coasts, and you can see this if you examine the LinkedIn job profiles. But it's bad for the Midwest because now all of a sudden there's a lot more pressure in the Midwest for talent than there used to be. So that's one. The next thing is what I call smart disinformation. Now, journalism's been on a death spiral for a long time. You can no longer believe anything you hear in the media of any sort for ground truth, and there's reasons for this. Most of them is owned by 2 or 3 different companies, and most of those companies are controlled by other forces out there. And so you can no longer think of media from your trade journal to what you hear in the wild out there as being true and unbiased. So they've lost their core values, they've lost their ethics and their integrity and all of that, right? So we've known that for a while. Hype, disinformation, these are key things. Now I'm going to factor in the omni-channel approach because there's psychological operation associated with that. If you hear something on your cell phone and on the web and on your tablet and in mainstream media and in the newspaper and on the billboards and all these other places, instinctively you go, it has to be true. No, it doesn't. What it is, it's a very carefully crafted digital marketing plan to get information to you because they know that if you hear it from multiple sources, you will never doubt it. That's a problem. Now, the thing I want to throw on top of that is throwing an AI in there, ChatGPT and many of these other technologies. When you do that, now you've got the ability to do that at scale. And you have the ability to do that at personalization at scale. So for each and every one of you, your own unique messages can be crafted. So the omni-channel approach, although from a digital marketing perspective, is wonderful, and others especially can be very nefarious activities, and we're seeing that. So that's why we call that smart disinformation. Now, the next thing I want to bring up is what I call the dehumanization of humans. All you HR people and recruiting people out there, this is for you. So, the HR and recruiting industry has leveraged AI and advanced technology to reduce human individual talent to its lowest possible form. An interchangeable commodity traded on the open market with its intrinsic value being determined solely by the market that seeks to lower that at every possible opportunity. So let's just look at how that gets implemented. So corporations, when they want to throw out a new rec for hire, they don't have their own band of recruiters anymore that they have personal relationships with. No, they take that rec and they throw it to an AI clearinghouse out there with tons of others. Those things are routinely downloaded by staffing companies of various sorts that also have AI in them, and then there's a race to grab the best candidate or any candidate and give them to the corporation. Now, what that nets out to is that corporations aren't necessarily interested in finding the best candidate anymore. They're only interested in finding the cheapest one, the fastest. And that changes things. Remember, we're dehumanizing humans. And it even gets worse when you get into LinkedIn. Right? So all of these folks engage in resume harvesting. Right? So that's a despicable process in and of itself. But they have an AI platform, and they make it very easy for corporations to list job postings. Now, what happens is they also make it very easy for candidates to one-click apply. And add into that the globalness, the non-geographical concerns of most of those jobs because we're remote. And then what the result is that a corporation puts a request out and gets thousands of applicants. You can see it. When you look for jobs in the job board, they can, you're one of 550 applicants. Now, how does that make you feel? So the dehumanization of humans is a real thing. Now, let's look at the massive velocity of AI. So AI isn't new, but it exploded this year. Why is that? I mean, AI is not new. There's all kinds of AI technologies that have been floating around for a long time. Each one of those maturing is taking steps. Well, there's two main concerns here. One, the actual cost of doing AI is dropping. It's becoming better at this. We're becoming more efficient at this. Number two, the research into AI is rocketing. Everyone's doing research into the space, basic research into the space, and new capabilities like ChatGPT and many others are coming to fruition now. And it's like lilies in the pond. You don't see the lilies growing in the bottom of the pond, you just see water. One day, all of a sudden, there's tons of lilies out there. This is kind of how it works. This is why we're seeing this massive velocity of AI so much right now, why it's the largest story out there. But that's not really what I want to talk about. There's some typical issues to handle, right? There's hype and fake news. They will always be there. But here's the two that I want to parlay out to you. One is the adoption of AI. AI is everywhere. It's in your phone, it's in technology, it's in your games, it's everywhere. It's in the news. But you know where it's not? It's not in your business, making strategic digital change along your corporation's digital journey. It's not there. It's the adoption and the uptick of AI in the corporate sphere to make real change isn't there. Now the optics, the massaging of the optics out there for marketing purposes and external comms purposes is there. But when you look under the hood, it's not really there. That has to change. We could talk all day on why that is. But that's an issue and it needs to be addressed. The other one that I want to parlay out is the evolution of AI technology. AI technology evolves. And if you look on there, you'll see a number of singleton technologies. And what you can expect to see, and we have seen this because we started playing with cognitive architectures, is the fusion of these AI technologies come together to create a hybrid that has more powerful techniques and more powerful capabilities. ChatGPT is still in the machine learning class, but it's a fusion of certain types of technologies in there, and you've seen what it can bring. We've played with cognitive architectures that can reason over context, that were built to examine human cognition in various forms. And we were able to use that to solve many problems that machine learning can't. And that was one of those other steps in the evolution of AI and technology. You'll see a fusion of these things over time. So keep an eye out for that, because what that does, when that comes, now we can do new things like reason over context automatically. Think of military autonomous drones that have to go on a mission. Once they get dispatched, they don't communicate with the command center anymore. They make all those decisions on their own. Let's look at knowledge velocity. So science and technology is best understood by examining the history, their history as it unfolds over time, to ferret out patterns and changes over time. This is one of those. If we look at the history of disruptive tech, and biology's in there, and we fuse that together with the shortening of innovation periods, you'll see that in that other screen. The innovation periods, innovation cycles are getting squished. They're happening faster and faster and faster. Remember, we talked about accelerating acceleration. Those two are larger trends to best understand the velocity of knowledge. What that nets out to are the two bottom squares. Your skills and knowledge have an expiration date because of the rate of change that hinges on those two top squares up there. And that has a profound effect on the workforce. So let's just double click that. So on the left, you have you when you enter the workforce at 0%. On the right, you have you when you exit the workforce, you're retiring at 100%. Typically, your skills start to get stale. In the 80% mark, you might have to reskill a little bit historically. But because of the increasing accelerating acceleration of change, that's being pushed back to the first third. Imagine that, of your tenure as a working professional. So you have old knowledge that dawns and expires much quicker. New knowledge comes from there, and skills, and those expire more quicker. Now, you could come in as one career person and exit as a completely different career person. Now, there's a need for continuous knowledge. There's a concern about the human animal's ability to learn skills that quickly. And there's a need for the right skills at the right time and for the right purpose. That's the challenge that we're seeing. You are going to see, and we do see, micro-careers. Mini careers that pop up because you needed to learn something new. When I first went to work in a Fortune 5 healthcare company, everybody just did standard machine learning, data science, machine learning, deep learning. We introduced cognitive technology, the reason over context, and we introduced quantum computing. They'd never seen it before. So you'll see these things. And then here's another WEF, World Economic Forum quote. Careers of the future, 65% of those young people today will be employed in jobs that we don't have names for yet, that don't even exist just yet. Well, that's been debatable, but I've seen it in my lifetime. So, escalating risks and realities. We look at quantum computing, we'll look at AI and the perception of reality, and we'll look at cybersecurity. So quantum computing is not more dangerous than artificial intelligence. AI is way more dangerous than quantum computing at the moment. So that's hype. What's not hype is the fact that China's come out and said, hey, you know what? We've broken RSA encryption using a quantum computer. How about that? And the West, of course, got their media machine. I go, no, you can't do that. But how many of similar spats have we had with Russia during the Cold War? Russia said, we did this, and the US media machine said, no, you can't do that. So that's not anything old. But what I will say, and I was at a conference speaking about this quantum computing just last night, you won't see quantum computing come into the mainstream on some wonderful exploitive idea that we're going to take advantage of. It just hasn't matured that fast. When it comes into the fray, the reality, it will come as on the back of a legitimate threat of breaking RSA encryption, and it will become a blunt force traumatic event that busts through the door that you have to deal with, that your technical staff must deal with. You don't have a choice to deal with that. That, from my perspective, and many others in this space, is how quantum computing is going to be coming into the mainstream. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Now, AI can alter the perception of reality. Right now, AI can alter perception of what you read, what you see, and what you can hear. And that poses a major security concern for the globe, because the globe is just not ready for that right now. When you cannot trust what you read, what you hear, or what you see, how do you establish ground truth? Genetics, DNA markers? We don't know. And then the cybersecurity threats and the numbers and the dollars of the trillions associated with that is the next thing in terms of risk realities. Hackers have access to quantum computing too. That sometimes they're state funded, which means they can execute their craft at scale. That changes the game. The security space is just not ready for that. And there's reasons why. But they need to get ready for that. Now, let's switch gears a little bit. What are those industries most disrupted by AI in the future that you can look forward to? Number one, healthcare, right? So healthcare is one of the most conservative industries out there. I worked in it, right? AKA innovation lags. The optics of innovation will not lag, though. But the actual innovation, that's going to lag. It's also one of the richest spaces for technology use cases, aside from DoD, which is kind of on the other end of that moral spectrum. And so there's tremendously rich use cases there. And its process of doing business and executing care delivery is horribly suboptimal at this point in time, right? CMS is now charging for virtual visits, is now paying for virtual visits. That changes the money landscape, which is something you should always look at in that space. So that's the number one, I think, area for AI disruption in the future. And it's all over the place. So customer experience is another one, customer care. All of the things you've heard in the news will play into that. Banking and financial services. When you look at mass personalization at scale, you as an individual, if I can have an AI that can reason over context for you as an individual and tell you what you need to know, but then tell you over there who's completely different, have a completely different use case, what they need to know, and do that at scale, that can change the landscape. Banking and financial services is up there. Logistics is all the way up there. I mean, logistics is a huge deal. C.H. Robinson, big company, one of the largest in the world. They fired their CEO this year. They're having a tough year. Technology is disrupting that area, but they're going to use technology smartly to build up a new way and a smart way of doing logistics. And there's some very bright people working on that. The retail model from end to end is going to be disrupted in that. And you're seeing that now. Cybersecurity, we've already talked to, and marketing. Marketing, oh my marketing. The omnichannel approach is something that should really be understood from a psychological perspective to an execution perspective in terms of content creation and content delivery. Because AI and advanced technologies will be doing all of that for you. And you'll be asking the question, like, is this really human authentic, or did some advanced silicon synthetic intelligence bring this content to me? Okay, so let's move back out of the concrete into the existential space a little bit to examine a couple of key parameters when it comes to technological disruption. If we look at low-tech, earlier times, low-tech disruption, and then we look at modern times, high-tech disruption, and we examine some attributes on both ends of that scale, the conversation gets very interesting. Space dominates in low tech. This is domination of space. Time dominates in the high tech era, so modern times and earlier times. Space, in the earlier times, low tech disruption, space is more real than time. Time is, and the forms in that space are stable. Cows and cars and trucks and the land. Right? Change is insignificant. It doesn't happen very much. And it doesn't happen very fast. The speed of change, the rates of change in that is very slow. Right? Geological time, glacial time. And time is relatively eternal. Now, modern times, that's not the case at all. Time dominates. Space doesn't dominate at all. In fact, when you get to cyberspace, space is obliterated. Forms are no longer stable. It's a never-ending sea of change of things within cyberspace. Change accelerates, and change melts down space. Time consumes, and it devours. Now, here we are in the middle of both those worlds. We have our human self, we have our digital self as well. Humans need to learn to effectively cope with the destruction of space and the dominance of time in this new digital world, as humans are not native to that space. Now, fortunately, this is not our first rodeo. We've seen this before. Humans aren't native of the air. We're not meant to fly. Humans aren't native of water either. We're not meant to be in the sea. Yet we have established détentes and equilibriums in both of those domains. So through trial and error, including the loss of life, we have arrived at a balance where humans can exist in both those spaces relatively safely. The same goes for cyberspace. But I will give you this warning. Let's be clear. We are not at that equilibrium in cyberspace just yet, not even close. That's going to be a journey all of us go on, but we have to make that journey. Now, rounding this out, this may have been a bit of a dystopian journey for you, but it's not all that bad. There's rebirth, exiting the comfort zone, and evolution of humankind. So rebirth, believe it or not, disruption is a natural part of life. Business and evolution. In a very real sense, this is the natural order of things, from the domestic to the cosmic. The universe is unfolding as it should, and we should take comfort into that. For those of you who have ever read the Desiderata, that poem comes to mind. We're going to exit our comfort zone. This is a very good thing. We love being comfortable. We're going to get into the fear zone, into the learning zone, and then the zone where we grow. Now, this is important because humans are made to butt up against stress. We have to have stress in our lives to continually grow in all of its forms. That's what makes humans human. The absence of that actually puts us a lot closer to death than we would like to realize. But make no bones about it. That is the case. Don't get comfortable. It's pretty close to the grave. And lastly, the evolution of humankind. Right? So disruptive technologies and disruption across the globe, whether it's geological or whatnot, has always allowed humans to evolve, the land to evolve and grow. There can and will be wonderful developments in this that truly help mankind grow and prosper from those technological disruptions. And with that, thank you for having me.